I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Jean-Philippe Monod, who is an old friend of ETOA. He sits on the advisory council, and he's the Senior Vice President of Government and Corporate Affairs at Expedia Group. Jean-Philippe, why don't you explain a little bit about yourself, what you've done, how you got to be where you are, and it would also be good to learn a little bit about Expedia, where you think it's going.
Let me start with, despite my French name, I'm actually Dutch. Have an engineering background, which is normally not what you would think of somebody in the corporate and government affairs world. So it helps me to combine more economic thinking as well as the more legal thinking of all the things that are coming at us in these days. And I think especially with COVID hitting us, we are making busy days at Expedia when it comes to corporate and government affairs. So Expedia Group, quick word, has various brands. So we operate the Expedia brand, hotels.com, ebookers. We also have some other brands in the United States, like Travelocity. We've got some brands in the rest of the world, Australia, What If. So they're all what we call the full, well, not all, but most are full service travel agency brands, where you can book flights, hotel, car, activities. Hotels.com is focused only on accommodation. We're also active in short-term rentals with Vrbo, HomeAway. And in France, that would be Abritel, and in Germany, it's Vevo Direct. We are also active in price comparison, meta search through Trivago. We're active in corporate travel through Agencia. And we're also active in advertising through our company called Media Solutions, and that's a company that works a lot with DMOs, to promote destinations, to promote locations and activities. So that's the Expedia Group. Well, actually forgot one important part is that we work also with businesses, with other websites. So we power a lot of websites that get supplied through our systems, which is our Expedia Business Services division, and they work with a lot of other websites that are themselves the consumer-facing brand, but we would then provide supply to them. So that's the company. We are. You wouldn't say when I joined Expedia, I didn't know it was that big. We've got 26,000 people working for Expedia. Unfortunately, I think we're going to be losing. We have lost over the last couple of months some people due to the crisis, but still, it's a lot of people divided over various parts of the company. The technology part, where we invest a lot in the way consumers can find their options for their holiday, the websites, the operations. We've got also a large amount of people that are actually working with the supply partners, the hotels, the airlines, such that they can find the best options on our sites, and that they get the support they need. And so we and sometimes we also work with third-party other tour operators who sell their packages through our sites. We are close to $11 billion in revenue, and that's what is the revenue of the group. Clearly, the tenfold of that is going through Expedia Group when it comes to gross bookings. So 100 billion plus. The crisis, of course, has hit us just as bad as anybody else. We lost 85% of our bookings in March, and in those first couple of weeks, not only did we lose a lot of our bookings, but at the same time, customers all started to call about the cancellation of their trips. which led to about 20 million phone calls in a period of 2 weeks. And on top of that, we had the challenge, and that was of course something that my team was looking at very actively, that the fact that governments were closing down our call centers in the globe, around the globe, so that while at the same time everybody was calling, we also had the issue that a lot of the call centers were at low capacity, if not closed, by governments, armies knocking on the door and just telling people, "Oh, go out now. We're locking down the property." So quite challenging times. That was in March, yeah, we have seen I think some soft activity coming back in Europe. One of the interesting statistics that I actually saw of the UNWTO was that 80% of travel in Europe is actually coming from within Europe. So the inbound travel into Europe, international travel, is 80% European. It's only 20% international. So if we think about that, and we know that Asia and the US is pretty much locked, so we're not getting that 20%, but the 80% is still in Europe. And of course, there's no free travel of all the places in Europe, but I think Europe has been opening up, and we do see that in the figures, especially in the Southern European countries. We see bookings go up, and of course more in the vacation rental type spaces where people have a bit more space, have their private situation, and we also see that people are driving there more like they're not taking flights to unless you have no other means. I mean, Tom, you're in the UK, so either you take the Eurostar or you're going to take a flight. Otherwise, you're stuck on the island, right? So
there are other modes of transport available, such as ferries, but the general point
yes,
is
you're perfectly welcome to take the ferry to the Netherlands and visit visit Rotterdam, and from there, of course, continue. But no, I think we generally see that go up, and yeah, and I think that that for the moment, Europe hopefully is able to recoup some of the summer traffic, but yeah, the international travel into Europe, I think, is completely locked, right? It is limited to those people that are able to get a flight to go visit family for urgent matters, or to actually move because they're going for another job. There is of course travel still, but lots of restrictions, all these quarantine requirements are not helping. So it is well, it's still keeping me and my team very busy to map all of that and to help our travelers to know where they can go and what routes are restricted and which ones are open.
I think you're right. It's an extremely complicated situation, and the Commission has been working very hard, has it not, to try and re-establish Schengen as a true free passage zone, not simply a single travel area, but something where people can move really freely. And this is proving very difficult.
Yes, so I think the difficulty is that here you see how governments are acting and thinking very nationalistic. And interesting fact, in the UK, for the first time, I guess in a long time, you'll see Scotland and Wales and England make different decisions when it comes to what countries do they allow in when it comes to quarantine. It was actually unimaginable, I think, that would happen within the UK. Well, let alone now that within Europe, all countries are going to say, okay, we're going to let the European Commission decide on all of this. So there was this list of safe countries, these 15 countries. I think in the execution, what we're seeing is that a lot of the governments, despite having that big discussion together of who should be on and who should be off the list, that when it comes to the actual implementation, that they're not uniform at all. Some are implementing, some have not at all implemented this list of 15 as safe countries. And probably by the time they get to some common position, the list has already changed because, well, things are constantly in flux.
They are in flux, and there's a central idiocy behind these lists, which country A allows country B in if country B's infection rate is lower than country A. But what is country B supposed to say? If you're suddenly dealing with someone with a higher infection rate than yours, you're not really that willing to play. So there is a real flaw in this discussion.
Yep.
And I think it's very interesting what you're saying, that things are taking off. I mean, my understanding is that you're starting to see the elements of the big shift of people taking their summer holidays in Northern Europe down to Southern Europe. You're certainly slowly starting to see this in the UK, especially after the opening up of Spain, Italy, and where have you, that people are able to fly there, and they're starting to do so. But it's a very, very small amount in comparison to what is normally occurring. And I think it's going to have huge impacts everywhere. I mean, I think Expedia obviously handles everything, but are you starting to see any recovery in city tourism, or is that as badly affected as we think it is?
I don't have the latest figures on that specifically, but I think generally what I've heard is that people are looking more for the countryside. Look at it. This is the city. Well, there are two drivers for that. The first one is, of course, that in the cities, people feel and maybe actually have more risk than if they were on the countryside. Just simple math, the amount of people that they would be in contact with. But secondly, the fact that a lot of the activities, and I've been on a couple of calls, on advisory calls with governments, among others the UK government, that the event sector is slowly reopening, but a lot of the things are just not yet operational, and especially when it comes to the places where there are a lot of people together. That and those are the things that you would do in a city, right? That's the attraction, and so people are, I think, choosing more secure places, countryside, coast, to have a holiday where they're more, in a small group, and but still have the feeling that they're on a holiday.
And then the other element, of course, is that cities themselves, the product isn't fully there. The restaurants are not running at capacity.
Yes.
The shops, some of them are still shut. Theatres are not functioning in London, for example. A lot of what people come to see and enjoy is not there at the moment. So it's a uniquely difficult position where you've got a failure in supply and a failure in demand. It's
Absolutely.
not a good time to be in business, I imagine, in that area. Tell me, I mean, you're dealing, obviously, you're based in Brussels, and you're dealing a lot with the European Commission. Do you think there's anything more they could be doing? I mean, they're trying to reassert a degree of control as everybody's getting nationalistic. They're trying to exhort people to coordinate the release from lockdown. And we know that there are going to be flaws in that, because people are going to react, well, city by city and regionally, as the situation changes. But do you see any positive, not positive change, but do you see any activity almost that's worthy of note?
Well, I think the European Commission, and what they can do is make sure that they are on top of these decisions, and that they maintain the control of the decision. So because we don't know what is going to happen. Unfortunately, we see little spikes come back into Europe. We've seen them in Spain, in Portugal. but the worst that could happen is that now people are going back to doing their own thing, closing their borders, having their own lists of people that can come in and who's on quarantine, etc. So I really would urge the Commission to maintain that really important role to put people in the same room and see that these things are coordinated. Because if the Commission is going to let this go, the first thing that every country is going to do is just think about themselves, and that's really when it's lost. And so the Commission needs to make sure that they're constantly reminding the member states, constantly verifying what the national politics, what the discussions are, what their national security councils, health councils are discussing, and how that interplays at the European level. And I think that's the role they should keep, and make sure that they think about that within Europe. And then secondly, what is really important that they continue to do is the coordination about how do we deal with travelers into Europe. So safe corridors, and I think they should really think about from a business perspective. They should identify what are the key feeder markets into Europe, and what are the situations in those countries, and then see how that can be reopened if there is a safe corridor, right? Because it's not good enough just to think about it from the health perspective. We are now in such dire straits as an industry, both the supply as well as the intermediaries, that the Commission really needs to focus on what is who are coming into Europe, where are those key streams, and that those that are knowledgeable about tourism and where the streams come from, that they are working very closely with those that are deciding the policy on what are the markets that can open, and what does that mean to Europe in terms of tourism. And I'm not at all suggesting that we should ignore the safety concerns, but I think that if decisions have to be taken, that those facts should be on the table, and that they need to know which markets are those important markets, so that if they say, well, we can wait for another 2 weeks, well, maybe we can't wait for another 2 weeks, because those are the key weeks for people to make their bookings, and those facts should be on the table.
Do you think they're going to realize it? I mean, they're looking at some people are talking about a €1 trillion hole in the European economy generated simply in the tourism area. And this is going to have a massive impact. Do you think one of the benefits, and benefits the wrong word, but one of the side effects of this crisis is that the Commission will start to recognize the economic importance of tourism? It's starting to come up the agenda in Commission discussions, I noticed.
Totally agree, and because I know you and I and everybody in the industry have been constantly saying, look, tourism is 10% of GDP in most countries, sometimes up to 20%. The more, if you look at some of the southern European countries, but yet to most of those people, those have been very abstract things, right? Okay, well, 10% of GDP sounds big, right? But what does it mean? What are the others? What are other industries? But now that they actually see how much that is in terms of jobs, in terms of people that are now in difficulties, in terms of the tourism sector as a whole, and everything that's connected to that, right? At the moment that that you don't have the restaurants open, well, then you don't have the wines coming in, right? You don't have the food coming in, and all of those volumes are down. And so the whole trickle down effect on the economy is huge. And I'm not sure that they even, when they talk about the 10%, take into account the indirect effect of tourism. So the moment you shut off the 10%, you're probably not only shutting off the 10% of the GDP when it comes to the tourism, but also the effect on the economy is far larger, because of all the suppliers to the tourism industry in food and drink, etc., that are not even counted in that 10%.
Jean-Philippe, thank you so much.
You're welcome.